We interrupt this program to bring you an urgent announcement.
Attention. Access to episode 4 has been granted. New level. Social security now unlocked. Activating code EasyLand.
Social Security gets over 1 million applications a year. People are getting denied at the state agency level. Every single American receives government benefits, even if they don't know that they do or understand that they do. Part of the reason that other countries are better at crises is because they pre-plan. Instead of saying, when there's a crisis, we'll send you money, they set it up where they do that kind of thing in advance.
That's to go down through the rabbit hole.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is EasyLand.
Uncut.
We are back with another Season 2 episode for the uncut, uncensored, unscripted version of EasyLand, the place where we hold nothing back, with your boy, Ishmael Izzy Bowden. By the way, official merch for the podcast is now available on the main website, on the main clothing and apparel website for EasyLand. So if you are an avid fan or listener and you like the content that you hear, definitely show your support by visiting the website, which will be in the description. Get your merch today and rep the EasyLand family. But anyways, I have for you all another epic discussion, because we're going to be talking about Social Security and their many issues involving disability benefits, how messed up the system is, and what are the different solutions or loopholes that can make it easier to get approved and receive proper government support. Joining me is Spencer Bishins, who formerly worked in Social Security and has great insight on the whole system. Better put in your thinking cap for this one, because you're about to get your minds blown. Let's dive in. Hello, fellow inhabitants of the outside world. I have for you a great guest. He is a former disability decision writer for Social Security Administration, now turned author for his first book, Social Security Disability Revealed: Why It's So Hard to Access Benefits and What You Can Do About It. With his book, he strives to bring awareness of the many issues Social Security has with their disability support and how potential applicants could get the chance to be accepted. I present to you Spencer Bishins. Spencer, welcome to EasyLand.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our discussion.
So Spencer, you worked in Social Security for over 10, 11 years or so. You've been in the guts of the system, interacting with tons of disability applicants. What was that experience like for you, and what led you to leave and actually make a book about it?
Well, I'll start with the second part, because that's an easy question. When I started with Social Security, it was kind of at the height of the baby boomers applying for disability. Once the baby boomer generation hit their mid-60s, they reached retirement age, they didn't need disability anymore. But 2010 to 2016 approximately, the baby boomer generation was like late 50s, early 60s, and so we were getting over 2 million disability applications a year. Now Social Security gets about half that. And at that time, people had good evidence. That generation was still working. They had good insurance, good evidence. People were older. There were a lot of approvals. However, I noticed that after 2015, 2016, so in other words, the last few years that I was with the agency leading up to 2021, we were doing a lot more denials. And my job was to actually write the disability decisions for the judges. And I just didn't enjoy that most of what I was doing was denying disability benefits, even when the medical records, the medical evidence, the medical opinion suggested that maybe we should have been approving more cases than we were. So the main reason I left is I just felt like the system wasn't really fair to people. I felt like there were a lot of promises being made. Don't worry, these benefits will be there for you if you need them. And then people needed them and they weren't there for those people. But before that, it was a very interesting experience because, we hear things like we're the wealthiest country on earth and we're the best and America's number one. And a lot of people have that attitude. But what I learned with working with Social Security is we're not the wealthiest country on earth because a lot of that wealth is very heavily concentrated. But most households in the United States, the vast majority have no savings at all, are living paycheck to paycheck, have absolutely no preparation if there's even a short-term illness that causes them to miss the paycheck, let alone some sort of injury or accident or long-term chronic illness. And I would see people's stories, right? That's what a medical record is. It's the story of your illnesses, your treatment, your work history, your hobbies and activities. And I could see people who felt like they had, pretty decent, solid jobs. Like, oh, I'm a plumber. I make $90,000 a year until, you get hurt one day and then you can't work at all. And your family's facing homelessness. You can't see a doctor. You have no insurance. And every day it was a new story of someone who thought they were fine financially and medically until that one day when they weren't. And that's what made me realize how truly unprepared most American households are for something happening to them, whether it be something sudden like an injury or more chronic long-term illness.
Level 1 cleared.
Yeah, and I was just very shocked by like how many rejections there were. Like you were saying, what, 60%, 800 or so, and they were even including those with physical disabilities. And the way this system is working is like it's very, very cruel. I mean, they're gambling with people's lives, and like you say, you've heard tons of stories, and and for them to get rejected, like there's always like at one point they seem fine, but then like something happens in their life that just changes the whole course of history. And but then when these systems are supposed to be something we rely on, they would turn us away and just leave us abandoned and stuff. It's just not right.
Yeah, at the initial level, you referenced this, at the initial level, when people first file their applications, over 70% of those applications are denied. And it's really unfortunate because there's several reasons for that. One reason is the agency is wanting to deny as few cases as possible, to deny as many cases as possible, to approve as few cases as possible. But the thing is, they know at that initial level how to deny cases because they know people aren't going to have great medical records. They're going to have disorganized records. There are going to be gaps in their treatment. They're not going to have very clear records. Social Security knows that most people, when they file a disability claim, just kind of presume they're going to be approved. So they don't really prepare very well for it. So they know they're going to be able to, by law and within the law, it's not like they're breaking the law. The Social Security Administration is just using the law that they have available to them in order to deny most claims. And that's a situation where Social Security knows what's going on, but the claimants don't. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book when I left the Social Security Administration is I don't think that's very fair, that Social Security knows what the average medical record is going to look like, how many pages it's going to be, how comprehensive it's going to be. It's not a fair fight. They know what you're bringing to them, and they know how to deny you. And you, the claimant, for most people, they never see that coming. They don't know that that's about to happen. And that's why I wrote the book. I want people to understand the process, to understand that you're probably going to get denied initially, that this isn't a fair fight, that Social Security is not a neutral decision maker. If you want disability benefits, you have to understand the system and you have to know how to work within the law and within the system.
You got to
And
play the game.
you got to play the game, and people need to understand that you can't just back into this. I'd like to go ahead and just reference your hat real quick. People need to think. You're wearing a math hat, which stands for Make America Think Harder. And that's the
Yes.
thing. You have to think harder about your disability claim. You have to think about what evidence you have, where you have gaps in your treatment record. Maybe you did see a medical source and you can go get that record. Even if you have good records, do you have medical opinions from those sources suggesting you can't work? You have to know the things that you have to have, and then you have to have those things, and you have to give that to Social Security in a neatly organized, airtight package. And you can't just accidentally do that, right? You have to really critically think about what you need to prove, how you can prove it, and make sure you have that proof. And that does require that we think harder. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know about make Americans think harder. I'm trying to help Americans think harder about what they're presenting to Social Security so they can give themselves the best chance at success.
Hey, preach it. And we're definitely going to go back to the hat later on in this discussion. But
I know why you have the hat on. I know exactly where you're going with that, but we'll come back later.
Yeah, you know what's up. But I did want to run it back to because you mentioned to me back in the void, aka the pre-recording, where you brought up this system like Raycon. I'm probably butchering it, but you were saying that it affected like how whether you'd be rejected or approved, and I was when I was telling you give you my testimony, and you mentioned that maybe it's because you use this Raycon system and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How does that apply to getting benefits, and are there like different types of stuff? Because I've never heard of it. It seems foreign to me. You mind further?
Well, yeah.
On that?
Give me about 60 to 90 seconds. It won't seem that foreign to you. So I talk in part one of the book about the two different types of Social Security programs: Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income. And then in part two, I lay out the 5-step sequential evaluation process. Well, in those two chapters, the other thing I'm also explaining is how the different levels that Social Security makes decisions. The first thing you do when you file an application is you file the application with Social Security, but actually that initial determination is made by someone at your state agency, usually the State Department of Health. So if you live in, say, New York, someone in Albany, some state bureaucrat is going to make that determination as to whether or not you're disabled. Then, and this next part has actually changed in the last couple of years. It used to be that depending on where you live, there would be a reconsideration step. And very recently, the agency has decided that just everyone should have this reconsideration step. And so if you lose that first decision, you appeal, then it also goes to someone else at your state agency. And that's called reconsideration because they reconsider their initial determination. And within the agency, they just shorten that to recon because it's just fewer syllables, RECON. And at reconsideration or recon, the exact same standards are used. It could literally be a state bureaucrat in the next cubicle over, and like one guy hands the file to the next guy, and the next guy goes, "Oh, you rejected this claim? I guess I'll reject it too." Rubber stamp. So fewer than 5% of cases are approved at reconsideration. And really the only way you can get approved at that point is if you have some kind of new evidence that you didn't give Social Security initially. So they deny you, you say, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed this enormously major piece of evidence. Here it is." And then Social Security says, "Oh yeah, that's what we needed. We'll approve you now." But it's very rare. In most cases, people get denied. They think, that can't be right. They must have missed something. I'll file for reconsideration. Then they get denied again because there's almost never new evidence at that point. And then at that point, people realize, oh, this is actually serious now. I got to go hire a lawyer or non-attorney representative. I have to go ask for a hearing with a judge. And that's when you end up going to the hearing level where you would go see a judge in a Social Security hearing office, which is where I worked, in the hearing office. So if you got denied but never went to a hearing with a judge, you probably are in that very rare group who got approved at that reconsideration stage. But yeah, like I said, it's really rare because at that point, people still don't have a representative in most cases helping them. And yet the state agency still very much has an incentive to keep denying you at that point.
Level 2 cleared.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like when you're like looking for a job and you gotta like change yourself or look presentable and stuff. I mean, it might the most it'll do is probably get your foot in the door, but it won't guarantee you. And housing is no different. They'll just put you on the waiting list and stuff like that. And there's just there's so many people who are left behind and have you waiting and waiting just to either be rejected or still be waiting. It's just
Yeah, there's a lot of waiting involved, but the thing is, a lot of people get very frustrated at the waiting with Social Security because when you get to the hearing stage, people wait a year and a half for their hearing for a 1 hour hearing, right? And a lot of times people are thinking like, why am I waiting so long? What could possibly be taking so long? Well, here's some math to explain that to your listeners. Social Security gets over 1 million applications a year. That's over 100,000 a month. There's about 200 hearing offices across the country. Most people are getting denied at the state agency level. So that means most cases are going to the hearing level where there's only 200 hearing offices and about 1,000 judges and a little over 1,000 attorney decision writers. So the volume is very, very high. Every single hearing office is constantly receiving thousands of cases every week, and they try and move through them as fast as possible. But there's just a backlog. A couple of years, maybe like 5 years ago, the backlog was like 2 years. Now it's down to between a year and a half. It might even be under a year by this point for a hearing. But yeah, that's why you're waiting so long. There's just a lot of people in front of you. It's not that the Social Security employees are moving slowly. They're just handling so many cases, and you're at the back of the line. So yes, there are substantial waits involved, but there's a very good reason for that. And also, the other thing is that actually works out for Social Security for the agency's benefit. They want there to be a wait time. They don't want that wait time to get too short. They want there to be a substantial wait time because some people just give up during that wait. They give up because they don't want to wait or because they can't afford to have no income for that long. So they feel like they have to go out and get a job, even if they physically or mentally can't do that. They might be forced to. People got to eat and pay their rent. So, and the more people that give up and exit the process, the easier it is for Social Security because, of course, that helps to reduce the number of cases they have.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's just a pretty messed up system. Because I mean, I want to share with you quickly about like I have a friend over in Canada who's with the French, and their system is more so they especially if you're disabled, the government will actually cover many expenses from housing, moving to disability and bills and so on and so forth. So like she's currently heading over to Quebec, and the only thing they told her is, hey, just relax, you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about getting a job in order to pay rent and stuff like that. And mind you, they're when it comes to approving or rejecting in terms of Social Security, they give you a response or send benefits in less than, at most, maybe a few months at most. And and they also have. Go ahead.
I think you were about to just say it. They also have a universal health care system, which is a very important part of that, right? It's a provincial-based healthcare system, but it covers everyone. And so a lot of people try and get Social Security, not even for the benefits, but they just need the Medicare coverage so they can get treatment.
Well, hold on. The universal. I do want to point out that the universal healthcare on the French side is is night and day compared is completely different compared to over with English Canadians, because the typical universal healthcare that's known in Canada, you still got to wait. Even though it's free, you still got to wait either 24 hours or more sitting in a clinic. So they do the whole waiting. They're basically no different than us. You just don't have to pay anything. Whereas like on the French side, they're very quick about it. So let's say you have an appointment with a doctor at like 9 a.m. You will see that when you show up at the clinic, you will see that doctor at 9 a.m. or maybe even a bit early. Like they're quick about it. Even at times when it's very crowded, even during the weekends and stuff. Sometimes when they have one staff available, like they're still on it. And there's even like with the Social Security, there's backlogs and stuff like that. They're still quick, and they have multiple crises and stuff. So like when I hear about that, and then I look at us where we actually have a lot more resources compared to them, and then but we're tripping over ourselves and struggling with these sorts of things. Like it just doesn't make sense, you know?
Yeah,
So
but I'm going to disagree with you on that. We don't have more resources than in Canada. I understand what you're saying about Quebec, but the whole Canadian healthcare system nationwide is a universal coverage, provincial-based system. So whatever province you're in, you're covered. And they pay higher taxes for that. But Canada, just like European countries, they've decided it's worth it. The people want whether their government is a liberal government or a conservative government, they want a universal provincial-based healthcare system where everyone is covered all the time. And in the United States, we don't have that. So even though we have a larger country and a larger budget, her budget goes to things like defense spending, right? Our healthcare and a lot of our healthcare dollars go to the profit from the health insurance companies or the hospital companies.
mm-hmm.
We don't have as many public resources in our healthcare system. And that's why when people lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance, and this benefits everyone but the actual citizens of the country. It benefits Social Security because they know that if you have a hard time getting healthcare, getting treatment, you won't be able to get documentation. You won't be able to prove your disability claim. It helps the health insurance companies because if you are disabled and unable to work, you can't work because of a disability, well, you lose your insurance. So then they don't have to cover people who can't work because of disabilities, whether they be chronic or accidents. But the thing is, we actually do have a lot of single payer and single provider healthcare in our country, if you think about it. The very old, the very young, very low income, prisoners, military, veterans,
Celebrities.
Are all people. Well, celebrities don't have a single payer system. They just pay their own. But you know, the military is a single provider system. The VA is a single provider system. We have the CHIP Act, Medicare, Medicaid. Prisoners are a single payer system. Sometimes their care is done within the facility. Sometimes they go to a hospital. But the point is, all of the people who need the most healthcare in our country, it's publicly provided. That's because health insurance companies don't want to cover the people who need the most healthcare. Right? They only want to cover people between 18 and 64 who are generally healthy, who can work, who don't have a severe medical situation, who can pay premiums and not need very much back out of the system. That's what you get when you have a privatized healthcare system. And that obviously serves insurance companies, but it doesn't serve the consumers. So I would argue that in Canada, there's far more resources for that 18 to 64 age range. In other words, the age range where adults are working. During your working life, you're getting a lot more healthcare services and documentation in Canada. In the United States, you're only getting health insurance when you don't need health care. At the point where you need health care, until 10 years ago, people were literally just dropped by their insurance. Oh, you now actually need care? Now we won't cover you anymore.
Because you're making too much.
The Affordable Care Act said you can't do that. You can't drop people just because they need the care that you promised them.
Okay.
But in exchange, the health insurance company said, fine, you want us to cover really severe illnesses? We're going to jack up the rates. The rates are getting to be unaffordable for many people. Even those Affordable Care Act plans are unaffordable for many people. So, yeah, we have a situation in this country with too much profit, misaligned incentives, and a healthcare system that's meant to benefit large corporations like insurance companies or large hospital companies. But the people who need the coverage and the care, they don't get it. If you're a 35-year-old and you're diagnosed with something like cancer, you can't work, you lose your health insurance because you can't work. Well, how are you supposed to get treatment? I knew someone who was diagnosed with cancer and she couldn't leave her job. Even in the last few months of her life, she couldn't leave her job and enjoy her life because she had to keep her health care so that she could try and get treatment. It was only in maybe the last 2 weeks of her life that she finally realized, I'm dying, I'm just going to quit. And then she died a couple weeks later. But we don't allow people to get the care and the treatment they need. And can I just say, it's really stupid because in a place where you allow people to get, if they can't work, in a place where you allow them to get the care and the treatment they need, it's so that they can improve medically and go back to work and pay back into the system for the next 20 years. But in our system, where once you leave your job, we don't let you get the care you need, what we're basically doing is discarding you from the economy versus helping to rehabilitate your health for the next few years so we can get you back into the economy for the next 20. That's what they do in Europe and in Canada. They help get someone better so that person can keep working and paying into the system. And financially, that's just much smarter. Whereas in the United States, a lot of times when people stop working, whether or not they get Social Security disability benefits, many people, they just never go back to work and they don't keep paying into the system. And all that does is destabilize the system further.
Level 3. Cleared.
And to follow up with that, because we've been having the pandemic occurring. I think that's still going on. How did that crisis affect disability benefits and all the things that you mentioned? Like did it actually make things worse or have things take a lot longer, and so or did a lot more applicants get rejected because of that and stuff? I mean, what was the deal there during this?
So when the pandemic happens, in-person hearings couldn't happen anymore, so everyone had phone hearings. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you on data because Social Security data lags by 2 or 3 years, and part of the reason is we had extended unemployment all across this country, right? So, and that went in through 2021. I left in 2021. Likely, what normally happens in a situation like that is people wait until their unemployment runs out, and then they go and apply for the other benefit system available to them. So my guess is disability applications probably went down in 2020 and 2021 because people had access to unemployment. And then when those programs ended, people probably flocked Social Security and the claims probably spiked upwards again. But those cases wouldn't even be coming to a hearing until 2022 or 2023. So we won't know what percentage of those people are being approved for another year or two. But I will say this. Job losses, I mean, we know that the job losses during the pandemic were really artificial, right? And we know that because when things opened back up again, some people went back to work. A lot of people chose not to, and we're still in a situation where businesses can't find enough people. So I don't think it's the case that the pandemic caused long-term unemployment. We know it caused short-term unemployment, but at that point, the people who wanted to go back to work could. The people who were medically able to go back to work could. And a lot of the people who didn't go back to work after that point, it was more by choice or they were choosing to do a different type of work.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, I do recall that like during the pandemic, there was a lot of distress and yeah, there was, and job loss and such. But with that, folks were just ready to, well, I mean, this happens in every crisis. Folks are just ready to like point fingers or just riot in the streets and stuff. They're just like, it's an absolute mess. And I remember seeing online where you had various Americans and working class and stuff who were frustrated with that, and then they started when they noticed that those with disabilities were who did get approved, who are still getting financial assistance. They're seeing that and going like, oh, so they get our taxpayer dollars, but we don't get paid for all this stuff. Why don't they just get a job? And they're just like they have this sort of ignorance and anger about it. And then when they see others getting support, whether it be through SSI or Social Security SSDI, they're just like, oh, they shouldn't be getting that. It's like they aren't worth our taxpayer dollars and stuff.
Yeah.
So
there's two issues that you talk about there. The first, and I talk about both in the book. The first one is other people's opinions. A lot of people have very strong opinions about how all taxes are spent, right? And here's the thing. Everyone is willing to pay taxes, but they're only happy if the taxes are used for the things they like, right? If it's something else, it's a waste of money. And for the people who aren't receiving government benefits, they just presume anyone who isn't entitled to them. But as I talk about in the book, every single American receives government benefits, even if they don't know that they do or understand that they do. If you think, oh, I'm not receiving any government benefits, go back and look at your tax return. If you filed and you claim the mortgage interest deduction, the child tax credits, there's so many things on your tax return where you've gotten a government benefit. Just take the child tax credit. Anyone with kids claims the child tax credit. I believe Elon Musk claimed and Jeff Bezos have both claimed the child tax credit. They're allowed to. The law allows them to. They're entitled to it. But let's face it, that's a government benefit. If you claim it, the government sends you a tax return. They give you money back. So why is it different for a Social Security recipient who's getting money or someone who claims a tax benefit on their tax return and gets money? It's a government benefit either way. But since we promised we were going to come back to your hat, I think this is a good time to do it. Because the other thing that you've mentioned is when there's a crisis, like the government seems unprepared, right? That it's important to remember that's just our government. That's the United States. A lot of European governments in Canada were far more prepared for the pandemic because they have universal healthcare systems. In the UK, they have such a good record-keeping system within the NHS, the National Health Service, that within 1 week, they immediately knew all the people in the country, the entire country most vulnerable to COVID, and they told them, literally, don't even leave your house to go grocery shopping. We will have a box of food on your doorstep by the end of the week, because they knew who those people were. They knew it by age and medical conditions. They knew where they lived, and they could literally deliver a giant box of food to their doorstep by the end of that first week. It's an amazing system, right? And that's why in certain places they were able to get through the crisis better, faster, easier, and without having to spend $6 trillion like in the United States. One of the things that we could do next time that we could have done this time is not have this stupid apply and approve system. Part of the reason that other countries are better at crises is because they pre-plan. Instead of saying, when there's a crisis, we'll send you money, which is what we did with the economic impact payments, they set it up where they do that kind of thing in advance, right? They give you healthcare before the crisis happens. Or, returning to your hat, that hat, of course, is something that Andrew Yang came up with in the last presidential election, right?
Yeah, man.
And his idea was send everyone $1,000 a month. And actually, that's pretty close to my calculation. I did a calculation where I took all the federal public benefits programs, SNAP, WIC, CHIP, Social Security, Section 8 housing, everything, and I aggregated all those benefits. And then I divided that by every American adult. And the number I came up with was around $800 per month. And then if you take into account the fact that you need a smaller bureaucracy because you don't have the apply and approve system, you could get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy, a lot of the federal employees. $1,000 a month is probably pretty accurate. And so when people say, well, $1,000 a month, how could we possibly pay for that? It's actually really easy. You wouldn't need any of these apply and approve systems. You would need Social Security disability. You just give everybody $1,000 a month, because that's recognizing that we're all aging. And at some point, we're all going to have a medical condition that makes work difficult at some point in our lives, right? So just set it up in advance. Give everyone $1,000 a month. It's money that you were going to give out anyway at some point over time. You're just doing it in an organized, controlled way so that when the pandemic happens, people are prepared. They're ready. If your job calls and says, there's a pandemic, don't come to work for the next month, you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay your rent. $1,000 isn't a lot, but it at least might help cover rent and utilities and maybe help you buy food, right? So that crisis that we had with, oh, people can't pay their rent, landlords are not going to be able to pay their mortgages. The rent market wouldn't have destabilized, the mortgage market wouldn't have destabilized, people wouldn't have been nearly as much of a panic. Congress wouldn't have had to scramble to set up a $6 trillion package, which involved about $3 trillion of theft and grift because it was done in such a sloppy way. In so many different ways, doing this in advance with a UBI, a universal basic income of $1,000 a month, it would have been more organized, it would have been more responsible, it would have helped more people, and it would recognize, hey, even if you don't need this money today, at some point you will. Everyone will have everyone has healthcare challenges. It might be a cold or flu, it might be a broken arm, it might be an accident. It's something different for everybody. And instead of making you apply and go through the very undignified process of having to prove that you need something, we should just acknowledge that we will all need something at some point and set it up in advance. And that's really what a universal healthcare system is, right? It's saying we're all going to need healthcare. Even if you're healthy, at some point you'll get in a car accident or you'll fall and slip on the ice. That happens to every Canadian, right? They fall and slip on the ice at some point somewhere. Everyone needs healthcare. So let's just say that out loud and give us a universal healthcare system. Well, everyone's going to need some kind of benefit from the government at some point. So if we just say that out loud and set that up and make that equal, then you don't have to come and prove to me when you need it. It's just there for you when you need it. I think that would be a much smarter system.
Level 4 cleared.
Correction, universal health care with high quality service, not some average see your doctor and stuff. Like, we should get the best. Everyone should get the best kind of care that like those with a lot more money will receive. You know what I mean? Like that's what I push for as well. And since you brought up universal basic income, that goes into my other question. And I hear that same why are you telling people to give $1,000 a month? Why can't they just work a job? Like, this is just what they call it free money or something like that, or it's like they're being spoiled or whatever. Okay, so, and I want to bring up that the during the pandemic we had those STEMI relief packages. They were like trillions, right? We only got, the American people only got breadcrumbs from that whole package. The rest, like you mentioned earlier, the rest went to the corporations. They went to foreign aid, the military, and even rich folks. And I'm sitting there going, and those who were against it or whatever, they're acting as if the American people got all that money. Like, no, we just got a speck of it. They just sprinkled a bit of generosity, over to our area, while everyone else got the moolah. So, but you were mentioning if we were giving like $800 a month or so, like we could do that. We could have, if all that money in those packages went to the people, that could have that we could have made that happen. I mean, but from those packages, we had like a large sum, not even that big of a large sum. It's like one time payment of like 1K, then it was 1200,
Yeah.
600, then 1400. It's like we could have done more with that.
So two things. First, anyone, and I talk about in the book how other people's opinions don't matter. Fraud, waste, and abuse in this system, that's not a real thing. That's not happening. And people really need to think about that. Like if your neighbor has an opinion on your Social Security disability claim, just ignore them. Their opinion, unless they're a Social Security judge, their opinion doesn't count, right? So when people say, well, $1,000 a month, why can't you just go get a job? First of all, you might also be working if you're a Social Security disability claimant, but $1,000 a month, that's not substituting for a job. That's just, there's no difference between someone getting $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year and someone else who has a $500,000 house with a $400,000 mortgage filing a mortgage interest deduction where they'll get a tax return of $12,000 the following April. It's $12,000 either way. But that person who's doing the tax returning and getting it back thinks, yeah, but that's money I overpaid into the system, and so I'm getting that back. Well, but how is it different if you get it back in one lump sum or in 12 equal payments of $1,000? It's the same either way. People just don't think about it the same either way. The other thing I want to say...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing I want to say is, to quote George Carlin, it's a big club of rich people, and
you're not in it.
So that's the thing, is it would be much better for Americans if we had universal health care and a universal payment every month, right? But
I would love to take weekly vacations like the Congress people.
But that's not how the system works, and that's not who wields the power in this country. It's very wealthy people, it's wealthy corporations, it's giant insurance companies, it's giant hospital corporations, and that's why the system happened the way it did. Those companies only make money if consumers keep consuming. And when we got to the pandemic and we all realized like a lot of people are going to be out of work immediately, and we talked about earlier how nobody has savings, the very rich people in this country realized spending may grind to a halt, and that's bad for our bottom lines. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow spending to come to a halt. So we have to figure out a way to keep money in the pockets of the people at the very bottom, right? We have to keep them consuming. So we have to do something. But let's do something in a way where we can skim a lot of that money off the top. So let's pass a $6 trillion package and $600 billion gets down, and we can. So yeah, it's a big club. You and I, we ain't in it. We don't make those decisions, but that's why it happens that way. And that's why it's going to happen that way the next time as well. Really nothing changed in this country. We don't have a universal healthcare system. Yeah, we had universal COVID vaccinations, but again, that was to get people back to work and back to consuming. That wasn't for healthcare. And the way I can prove that is it's only for COVID. It doesn't apply to flu shots or any other coverage. It was just COVID vaccinations because we needed things to not be shut down. We needed shopping and consuming to not be shut down. But that big club that we ain't in still runs things. And just to conclude here, I know this is a lot of like downer, right? But that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to understand, and it's in the subtitle, I want people to understand why it's so hard to access benefits. And that was we've been talking about this whole episode, right? Here are all the reasons that Congress and the Social Security Administration have set this program up for you as the claimant to fail. But what you can do about it is the second half of my subtitle. Because once you understand how the system is set up, why it's set up a certain way, you then also understand the things you can do to improve your chances. You understand, okay, I know how this healthcare system is set up against me. Here's some suggestions about places I can go get healthcare that are free or low cost. Once I understand how the agency's decision-making is set up against me, and I know how they make their decisions, I know how to hire a representative, who I should hire, what my job is, what the representative's job is, and how we can work together to present my disability case to give me the best possible chance at success. I wrote for some judges that were pretty low payers. They paid about 20% of their cases. And that sounds like a daunting figure. But here's what you need to remember. If you're a claimant and you get a judge and you look up that judge and you find they only pay 20% of their cases, they're paying 1 out of every 5 cases. So instead of looking at that and thinking, oh, those are bad odds, it's not a random 1 out of 5. It's the 1 out of 5 that had the best evidence, the best presentation, a really good representative. You want to be that 1 out of 5. And there are certain things you can do. There are certain strategies that you can help yourself be that 1 out of 5 and get that approval. So that's what I talk about in the book. I want you to understand not just that it's some judges pay 1 out of 5, but I want you to know how to be that 1 out of 5 so that whoever your judge is, because you can't control which judge you get, right? Whoever your judge is, whatever hearing office you're at, I want you to know how to present your Social Security case to give yourself the best possible chance at success. Social Security does approve a lot of cases, as you know, and you just have to know how to work within the system. Don't fight against the system. Understand the system and work within it, because it's the only system we've got right now. We don't have a UBI. All we've got is the current system. So you need to know it, understand it, and know how to work within it to give yourself the best possible chance at having your individual claim approved.
Well, I think the other goal is about prevention, to keep things from escalating. Like I'll use another example, about like UBI, like over on the French side of Canada, again, over in the Quebec government, they, during the pandemic, they actually gave their people $1,500 a month. Because I believe they had like stage 4 lockdown or something like that, and they couldn't work. They had to do everything remotely. And because of that, they were left with 2 choices. Either one, they open back up the economy and try to risk folks getting COVID, or two, they had to give these folks compensation. Otherwise, it's going to lead to some major protests on the street. And they chose the latter, because they want to avoid anything from getting worse, even though like they had to keep part of the economy open, just because they didn't have enough funds to draw off of. But what mattered is making sure their people were taken care of. There wasn't
the key. Yeah. That's the key difference, right, between the United States and other developed economies. That's the key difference. Is other countries, their main thing is, how do we take care of people? And because there's no money in politics, right? They've short elections, they're publicly funded, and the people will vote and the people will protest. And the people choose the politicians, not the other way around. That's just not the case in the United States. We have a lot of wedge issues. We're always politicking. We're always running for office. There's a lot of corporate money for so many different reasons. The United States is different than all of these other developed countries, and not in a good way. We're just not quite as developed when it comes to caring about and taking care of your people. And so we have the Social Security system that we have. And again, you just have to understand that system, and you have to know how to work within it in order to give yourself the best possible chance at having a successful claim. And ultimately, that's why I wrote the book, Social Security Disability Revealed.
There you go. Now, I know the end of our discussion is drawing near, so before we depart, are there any other final thoughts you would like to share with the audience? And could you also tell them where they can find you on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, our website is bishinspublishing.com, BISHINS, publishing.com. We have links there to our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Facebook and Instagram are at Bishins Publishing, Twitter at Bishins Pub. But also on the website, we have a full description of the book and the table of contents. So you can see all the topics and how it's laid out and understand what we're trying to say in the book. There's a little bit of about me. And ultimately, the thing is, the reason I wrote this book when I left Social Security is I really understood, after seeing thousands of cases, I understood how the deck is really stacked against claimants, how Social Security knows what's going on, they understand their own system, and the claimants don't. And that's not a fair fight. And that's why I wrote this book. I want you to understand the Social Security system. I want you to know how to work within it Because if you understand Social Security's system and you understand how they're making decisions and what kind of evidence you need, now you can work within that system and not let it get you down. You can feel like you know what's going on. You can feel empowered, and you can feel like you can get through this. Don't give up. There's always a next step in the process. Even if you get denied, I tell you how to appeal. There's always a next step. There's always something else you can do. Keep pushing forward. You paid into that system. You deserve those benefits. Keep pursuing them and do what you can so you can give yourself the best possible chance of having a successful claim.
Yeah, you're preaching to choir there, and it really should. Receiving these sorts of benefits and such, they should come easy, because it's like not everyone has the wherewithal to be able to apply these things and know which methods to take and stuff. This is good teaching, but also we should have an easier system because there are a lot of people suffering, as what's been insinuated throughout this discussion. So yeah, we should definitely fix that. But thanks again for coming here and speak with me, Spencer. I will definitely leave all the info for you all in the description of this episode, and make sure to pick up his book, Social Security Disability Revealed: Why It's So Hard to Receive Benefits and What You Can Do About It. Any local bookstore in your area or online, definitely pick it up when you can. But that's it for today's episode. I'll see you all again right here on Izzyland Uncut.
You've just reached the end of today's episode. Subscribe on Spotify or any available platform and be the first to hear new episodes once released. Donate through Cash App, PayPal, or become a Patreon member if you'd like to contribute. The next update for Izzyland Uncut is currently in progress. Now logging off.